So now today's TEVES, Chamisha b'TEVES. I want to speak about the siches from Menvov, from the winter of '86, when the case was actually going on. What happened was, in the summertime, the Rebbe spoke about the Sfarim publicly 4 times. Yud Beis Tammuz, Tezvav Tammuz, those were 2 Farbrengens. There was also a Yechidus for Orchim. Those 3 occasions, there's actually a video and a tape. And then the next Shabbos, which was Shavasa B'Tammuz, Pinchas, the Rebbe spoke again. And then the Rebbe stopped talking about it completely. He didn't speak about it publicly anymore. The trial took place about 5 months later, from Tammuz till Kislev, Rechen. Tammuz of El Tishrei Cheshvan Kislev. Tammuz of El Tishrei Cheshvan Kislev. So it's about 5 months. The trial took place from before Yutas Kislev through Chanukah. The trial finished after Chanukah. The following year, after Chanukah, the judge gave his verdict. It took the judge a year to write his decision, to decide his decision, and to write his decision, and to publish his decision, and so on. So first of all, I'm sure you know one of the most interesting stories. The Rebbetzin was deposed. The Rebbetzin was deposed in conjunction with the Pashas HaSfarim. Yudel Krinsky, as I told us that he was afraid. He was afraid that the Rebbetzin, they were going to pressure. He was afraid that the Rebbetzin wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. And he told his concern to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said to him in English, "Sorg sich nicht, she will pass with flying colors," the Rebbe said in English. And she passed with flying colors. He passed with flying colors. Recently, he also revealed an interesting thing. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The last day of the trial was a Friday. And the judge asked to see the Rebbetzins deposition a second time. The judge wanted to see her again. And he watched about 15 minutes, and his comment was remarkable. I don't know exactly what, but the Rebbetzin impressed him. Remarkable. Remarkable. And the Rebbe said publicly, and it's in the Mugad Kasiches, that the Rebbetzin was instrumental in the case of the Sfarim, in the case of the Sfarim. Her words, the Rebbe quoted her words, "The Sfarim belonged to the Chassidim because my father belonged to the Chassidim." Those were the final words of her deposition. But the other side of that coin is they wanted to depose the Rebbe. They wanted to depose the Rebbe. And it was pretty hot. It was very, very uncomfortable. The judge made the decision on the morning of the deposition. The Rebbe was supposed to be deposed Yud Gimel Kislev, Tavshin Memvav. That morning the judge said, no deposition. No deposition. Whatever the grounds were, we approached this from a medical angle. The bottom line is the judge said, whatever you need to know from the Rebbe, he's already said publicly, you don't have to ask him in private, it's all in the siches. So I heard from Rabbi Shem Tov, that they were planning the deposition for that day. The deposition was going to take place in the Rebbe's library. And our lawyers came, and their lawyers were supposed to come, and the court people were supposed to be there, and they were deposed the Rebbe in the library. And the morning of the day of the deposition was canceled. So the Rebbe said, we scheduled it, so we'll do it anyway. You never heard this before. The Rebbe planned, the Rebbe put into a schedule a couple of hours for the deposition. Let's do it anyway. So the Rebbe went to the library, and he had a Farbrengen with 4 people. Rabbi Shem Tov, Rabbi Krinsky, Nat Lewin, and Shestek, our lawyers, for about an hour. In other words, what was supposed to be a deposition the deposition was canceled. They didn't make the Rebbe testify. But the Rebbe said, I put it into my schedule. Let's use the time. And the Rebbe pushed it, had a Farbrengen. Rabbi Shem Tov told me the Rebbe sat back. The Rebbe never sat back. The Rebbe always sat in the middle of his chair. The Rebbe sat back and relaxed. And he Farbrengen with such a harchav. It was a beautiful tziyur. And he talked about what a Rebbe means. He talked about what a Rebbe means. You should know one of the most important details of the whole Pashas HaSfarim, and it doesn't get enough press. It doesn't get enough press. The Rebbe was asked to write his own job description. Are you aware of this? The Rebbe was asked to give his own job description. If you want to see it, send me a WhatsApp. I only need one of you, and send it to your friends. The Rebbe had to write a description of his job.
Of what it is to be
what it means to be a rebbe. And the rebbe wrote it. And it was brought into the court. It's about 10 lines. It's very interesting. And the basic description is that the first job of a rebbe is his public job. His hashpah on people, to be a dugma chaya for a servant of Hashem, to get people to learn from how to be the Yud of the Eibishter. And then va'achakach bo avedosei betur prat. Afterwards is his personal. Most people, first is personal, then is public. The Rebbe wrote about himself, my first job is to be a good Rebbe. My second job is my own personal avodah. That's what the Rebbe wrote. So the Rebbe spoke about what it means to be a Rebbe in this little fabreng. Anyway, the trial went on for 3 weeks. During those 3 weeks, the Rebbe went to the oil every day. Chaver were getting up in the morning at 7 o'clock in the morning and saying Tillim. And I heard this from my son, who heard it from one of his mashpiyim, that there was a typical fight between the old and the young. It's that the Alter Chassidim was saying you have to fast and say Tillim, and the young was saying you have to be v'simcha and trachet v'zayngut. And the Rebbe said Yemel the Maimer, Margel b'puma derove. So somebody explained, I wasn't here, but that the Rebbe saw the Maimer about that Maimer about trachet v'zayngut was bekeshet to this. Be v'simcha trachet v'zayngut. Anyway, but the Rebbe went to the oil every day during the trial. So during those 3 weeks, there was a push of the Rebbe to do Miftzah Chanukah like never before. We were away. I was in California. The Rebbe wanted they should light a menorah in every single city in the world. Even when there's no Jews, come to a city, light a menorah. Because the Rebbe's mindset was that when there's a kitrug, when somebody is telling you you're not doing enough, the answer is to do more. So that Chanukah was Mem Vav, 85 to 86. There was a Moeden de Kishturim about Miftzah Chanukah, and there was also, by the way, a Moeden de Kishturim about Chanukah Gelt. Chanukah Gelt was a big deal. The Rebbe in later years started talking a lot about Chanukah Gelt, and I think it started Mem Vav. So the Rebbe talked almost every day of Chanukah, and the message was do. The Rebbe never said because of the Sfarim, but people who were paying attention realized that it was connected to the Sfarim. It culminated in the end of Chanukah. I don't know the kviyas, but there was a fabring in Shabbos, there was a fabring in Motzei Shabbos, and a fabring in Sunday night. 3 fabrengens in 48 hours. And in those 3 fabrengen, which was the end of the Parshas HaSfarim, the Rebbe gave an outline of what was happening spiritually that was distinct. It was different than what he spoke this summer before. So what did the Rebbe speak in the Sichas of Mem Vav? That's what I want to talk about. Okay, this is where I become the Ba'olavim, because I'm choosing which Sichas to discuss. Basically, the Rebbe went back to the classic Chabad language. What's the classic Chabad language? The classic Chabad language is, and I'll start from the beginning, that the Mizitcha Magid, there was a Kpeda against the Magid because he's spreading too much Chassidus. Right? And the Magid's life was in a sakana. The Rebbe spoke all of this out during the Sichas of Chanukah Mem Vav. And the Alter Rebbe removed the Kpeda by telling the story of the Even Tev Shebekesser HaMelech. Do you know what I'm talking about? You know what I'm talking about? That the Pinchas Koretzer found the page of Chassidus rolling on the floor. And he got upset. And the Alter Rebbe told him the story that when you have to save the life of the prince, you smash the crown, you take out the precious stone, which is the base of the king's crown, which is called Yechida, which is called Machon, which is Chassidus. You grind it up into a powder because you have to save this prince's life. If the prince doesn't live, what's the point of all of it? You have to save his life. Meaning, we're spreading Chassidus not because we're so worthy, but because it's Pekuach Nefesh. And when the Alter Rebbe told the story to Pinchas Koretzer, he removed the Kpeda. Then comes the next generation. The Alter Rebbe is arrested, the Alter Rebbe is sitting in jail. Now we all know why the Alter Rebbe went to jail, because the Misnagdim didn't like him. But while the Alter Rebbe was sitting in jail, and again, the Rebbe spoke all of this out, he was visited by the Baal Shem Tov and the Magid, and he asked them, why am I sitting in jail? And they told him, you're sitting in jail because you're spreading too much Chassidus. So the Alter Rebbe said, Oy bazoi, if that's the case, when I'll go out of jail, I'll stop. He said, no. Now that you started, if you survive this, when you go out, you should reveal even more. So the Rebbe asked an obvious question. The question that the Rebbe asked was, there was already a Kpeda by the Magid. And the Kpeda was already removed because the Alter Rebbe told the story of the prince and the Even Tevish B'Kesed HaMelech, the precious stone which is the base of the king's crown. So why was there Kpeda on the Alter Rebbe again? It was already settled. In the generation before, it was already established that Taka revealing Chassidus, especially in our generations, when the Rebbe used to say always, Ach Shedara B'Tmiya, we deserve Chassidus. If the Tanoim and Amoraim didn't deserve Chassidus, we certainly don't. So why was it revealed to us? There's only one answer, because it's Pekuach Nefesh. So once you have the answer, why are you going to jail again? And the Rebbe's answer, of course, is when you reveal more, you have Nachak Peder. You have to reveal Chassidus to save the prince. But how much? Alter Rebbe was Miyasad Chassidus Chabad. Alter Rebbe was revealing even more Chassidus. Because he was revealing even more Chassidus, there was a renewed Kpeder. This is what the Rebbe said. Derech Agav, there's three whole Fabrengens on this theme. One of the most interesting conversations that the Rebbe had when the Rebbe spoke about this is it dominated the Fabrengens. You have to must understand, this was happening as the trial was happening. It dominated the Fabrengens. The Rebbe asked the Poshta Shaila. Everybody knows that Teira Leiba Shamayimi, right? Everybody knows that Teira is not in heaven. If Teira is not in heaven, how could the Mizitcha Magid and the Baal Shem Tov Paskin? They had passed away. The Alter Rebbe is sitting in jail. And his Rebbes who were Neil Ma'emes, the Mizitcha Magid was Neil Ma'emes for 36 years, the Baal Shem Tov was Neil Ma'emes for whatever it is, for 40 something years. They come to visit him and he asks them, why am I sitting in jail? And they tell him, you're sitting in jail because you're spreading too much Chassidus. She says, I'll stop. He said, no, give more. How could they paskin? They're not in this world. How could they paskin? They're not in this world. And the Rebbe gave what seems like a very simple answer, but this simple answer is the deepest of the deep. The Rebbe answered because they came to him in a goof. When there was a Magid and the Baal Shem Tov appeared by the Alter Rebbe, they didn't come as a ruach, as a neshama. They came in a body, and the Rebbe saw them in a goof. And because they were in a goof, it was not Teira B'Shamayim, it was Teira B'Aretz. Now, B'Pashtus, it's a pshet, a kashem tateretz. But it's not a kashem tateretz. Because what the Rebbe is really saying is that a tzaddik who passes away, if he comes back into this goof, he's in this world. A person passes away, they're finished, it's over, it's done. But by tzaddikim, the tzaddik's neshama is in a different world. He comes back into it. Was in a goof, he's again alive, physically. Which I think has a lot to do with the spirit of the case. The Zare B'chaim, Avu B'chaim, that because the Chassidim live, the Rebbe lives, it's begashmius like this. When the Mezritch Magid and the Baal Shem Tov came back into a goof, they were halachically, physically living, and they could paskin a shayla on earth. Now, and then, from this came the Hemshech. And the Hemshech, like I said, it was a bit circumspect. The Rebbe he wasn't very vague, but he was vague enough, And basically he said that now we have a Kpeda again. Right there, a Kpeda. What's the Kpeda now? So again, he didn't say it outright, but he said it almost outright, because we're revealing even more. Just like there was a Kpeda by the Magid, and nevertheless by the Alter Rebbe there was a second Kpeda, because he's revealing more. So the same is true by us. We're revealing more Chassidus, so there's a new Kpeda. Now I want to interrupt and tell you a story, okay? Meir Afton made a little book called Eidos Ba'afela. In this book he has stories that he heard from his mashpiyim, which are not printed anyplace else. One of the stories which he writes is that when the Frierdiker Rebbe went out of jail, in Peizayin in 1927, he left Leningrad and he went to Malachavka. He disappeared. He went to a suburb of Moscow because he realized that he's not really free. They're not going to touch him, but anybody who came next to him went to jail. They made the whole world into a prison. He's the only free person. He couldn't do his work. So that summer the Rebbe disappeared, and then at the end of that summer he went to Rostov, and then he made the decision to leave Russia, and he left Russia the following winter, right after Tishrei. But that summer the Rebbe Rayatz was hiding basically in a suburb of Moscow, and there were only 5 people who were allowed to visit him. No one was allowed to visit him. It was prohibited. The Rebbe said, don't come to me, because it's not good for you, it's not good for me. One of the few people who was allowed to visit was the Rebbe's secretary. He was then the head of the yeshiva. His name was Reb Chatzah Feigen. Chatzah Feigen was a big chassid. He was a big Mekushet. He was then the Menal Pel the Yeshiva. Later on, he became the Frierdiker Rebbe's right hand, the Frierdiker Rebbe's secretary. Unfortunately, he was killed by the Nazis in Riga. He came to see Frierdiker Rebbe. And after he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe, he came back to the Bachrim and he repeated things the Frierdiker Rebbe told him. And this is an unusual story that I've never seen any place else. And I believe the story is true as a very authentic source. Reb Meir Afson heard it from Reb Achei, who heard it directly from the Frierdiker Rebbe. That the Frierdiker Rebbe told Reb Achei that in the time of the Mezritcher Maggid, he was supposed to go to jail just like the Alter Rebbe. But the Mezritcher Maggid was supposed to go to jail just like the Alter Rebbe went to jail. For the same reason, because he was spreading too much Chassidus. Why didn't he go to jail? Reb Zusha Hanepel, what is their head? Reb Zusha Hanepel was a Talmud of the Maggid. And he was a tzaddik of tzaddikim. He was an incredibly holy Jew. He was a godly, godly man. Reb Zusha Hanepel, one of the Alter Rebbe's best friends. Alter Rebbe called him a Yedid Nefesh. Reb Zusha Hanepel. And Reb Zusha Hanepel had connections to Lamaila also. He found out, not by speaking to the Misnagdim in Vilna, you understand? He found out what's going on Lamaila, that the Maggid is supposed to go to jail. So Reb Zusha Hanepel said, Rebbeinu Shalom Zusha will nicht. Reb Zusha Hanepel said, Master of the world, Zusha doesn't want. Reb Zusha Hanepel found out, Lamailo, that the Maggid is supposed to go to jail. And Reb Zusha Hanepel said, Rebbeinu Shalom Zusha will nicht, so the Maggid didn't go to jail. So Reb Chatzah Fagin says to the Frierdiker Rebbe, Soll der Rebbe sagen, als will nicht. The Rebbe just told him the story. That the Zusha Hanepel said, Zusha will nicht, and the Mezritcher Maggid didn't go to jail, so the Rebbe should say, the Rebbe will nicht. And the Rebbe didn't respond. He didn't answer. He didn't answer. Now, his non-answer, we don't know what it means. We don't know what the non-answer means, but there is a story. There is a story, which is printed from the Alter Rebbe's own hand, that the Alter Rebbe met Reb Baruch Mezhbazher, who was younger than him, but he was he was Shem Tov's Einikol. He was a big misnagid of the Baal Shem, of the Alter Rebbe's. And Reb Baruch Mezhbazher, it's a letter from the Alter Rebbe himself. This story is for sure true. The Alter Rebbe wrote the story himself. Reb Baruch Mezhbazher said to the Alter Rebbe, "Why did you get to Peterburg? Why did you allow yourself to be arrested and go to jail? Hast das gekent a Rebbe gehen behavoras hayad alametzach." The Baruch said to the Alter Rebbe, you could have accomplished the same thing as going to jail by doing this. So why did you allow yourself to be arrested and go to jail? So the Alter Rebbe's answer is not there. But in the Teresham, the Sichas of the Rebbe Rashab, he explains that if you don't go to jail, you don't break it through. You have to go through the world, not over the world. And the only way to go through the world is to actually go to jail. Now the Alter Rebbe went to jail not because he had to suffer, because this is the only way Chassidus was going to win in this world. So Reb Zusha Hanepel says, Zusha will nicht. Reb Chatzah Fagin says to the Frierdiker Rebbe, so the Rebbe sagen, as will nicht, and the Frierdiker Rebbe says, he didn't say, I'm not going to say it. He didn't explain why, he just ignored him. He didn't respond. And this is the only husband. You have to mitzvah durchgehen. So now, going back to us, this was the theme of those Fabrengens, that just like there was one Kpedin, there was a second Kpedin, one time a Rebbe went to jail, second time a Rebbe went to jail, third time went to jail. Why? Because the more you spread Chassidus, the more the Kitter becomes. So the Rebbe implied that this is what's happening now. And the Rebbe said, what's the answer? What's the answer? Just like the answer was then, do more. What did the Alter Rebbe do when people criticized him? What did the Alter Rebbe when people criticized Chassidus Chabad? You know what he did? He did more Chabad. The more you squeeze, the more oil you get out of the olive. So the Rebbe said, we need to do the same thing. Now, again, without saying it explicitly, but this was the spirit, since there is a kitrug, since there is a kpeda, since there is a force that's coming up and tining, that what the Rebbe is doing is not warranted, it's not acceptable, it's not necessary, it's too much. If Haraya the Sfarim were taken, in the Rebbe's mind, taking the books was the same thing as putting him in jail. Literally. So the Rebbe said, the answer is to do more. And I'll tell you another story. In 1981, 4 years before the Sfarim story started, Reb Nissen Nemenov was here for the last time. Nissen Nemenov came for a bar mitzvah. And the Rebbe called him. The Rebbe called him into Yechidus. The Rebbe didn't have Yechidus anymore at this point, or whatever. The Rebbe called him Nissen. The Rebbe called him Nissen in to Gan Eden Atach, and he told him as follows. He says, I decided to print Chassidus Moed Rabbeim. All of it. No secrets. The minute I get a new mimer, I type it, I edit it, and I publish. And I have every intention of printing my money from the Alter Rebbe, each one. The Alter Rebbe, and the Mittler Rebbe, the Rebbe the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Rebbe Marash, and the Rebbe Nishmaseden, and the Rebbe the Shver. I'm printing Chassidus of all the Rebbeim. And this is true after the Rebbe's heart attack, after Tov Lamed Ches. The Rebbe started printing within 4 years. 4 years, the Rebbe printed maybe 20 volumes of the Alter Rebbe's Chassidus. It was a deluge. Nobody even knew the Maimonim existed. All of a sudden, they're all available. Everybody has them on their shelves. And then as soon as they finished with the Alter Rebbe, he started printing the Mittler Rebbes. All the Chassidus Chabad. Just give it out. Before that, the Rebbe used to think about printing one sefer a year, maybe 2 svarim a year. All of a sudden, every month and a half, you have a new volume of Chassidus that no one even knew that the Rebbeim had the Ksavim. So the Rebbe calls in the Nissen, and he says to him, I made the decision that I'm printing all the Chassidus, all the Rebbeim. Und keine lernen sie nicht, the Rebbe said. No one is learning them. They're sitting on the shelves. I can tell you when no one's learning them. It was so fast. It was impossible. If every 6 weeks they had a whole volume of the Rebbe's Chassidus, you think that the Rebbe's Chassidus is easy to learn? And the Rebbe, no one's learning them. And then the Rebbe said in Yiddish, I'm afraid that because of this, I'm going to get a pinch on the nose. You know that's what I mean. It's a pinch on the nose. In other words, it's going to cost me. And the Rebbe said, ich will nicht nispal werden und ich will drucken weiter. I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to continue to print. A lot of people have made the connection between this little episode that happened in 1981 and what the Rebbe said 5 years later, Chanukah, in Memvov, where the Rebbe explained, without saying it explicitly, but it was rather clear, that the reason for the Parshas HaSforim is because we're spreading too much Chassidus and we're not using it properly. When the Dida Natzach happened, I was not in New York, but I saw the videos. There was big Fabrengens. One of the people spoke at that Fabrengens is a Jew that I have an enormous amount of admiration for. His name is Rabbi Shlomo Kunin. So he got up and he said, every tefillin is a sefer. Every menorah is 10 svarim. He understood it very plain. When you go out in the street to put tefillin on a yid, you save 1 sefer. You go, you put up a menorah, you save 10 svarim. He explained it how he saw it. Rabbi Kunin is a very big chassid. Rabbi Kunin is not a gadol, it's not a goan, it's not a talmid chacham, he's a shliach. He said every mitzvah is another sefer. Because that's how the Rebbe presented it, Chanukah Mem Vav. That this whole parsha is because we're not doing enough. And the answer is to do more. And that's what happened during this entire period. The Rebbe talked about it from every angle. He told the story of the Pichas Kodetzeh Ba'arichas, with the Even Tesh B'Kesed HaMalach. He told the story of the Alter Rebbe being visited in prison Ba'arichas. And he studied these stories. The Rebbe gave us a body of Torah in that few weeks, which was actually when the trial was going on and finishing, to present the case that the whole Parshas HaSforim is a kitrug, because we're giving too much and we're not doing enough. This was the spirit of it all. You follow? This is the spirit of it all. But here's the clincher. This is the part that's most interesting of all. The next year's Mem Zayin. Dida Natzach, right? Dida Natzach, yippee, we won, they lost. It's so not simple. It's so painful. It's so unbelievably painful. But I mean, Chassidim. So they told the Rebbe that we won, and the Rebbe didn't react at all. The Rebbe just continued working. He just told Yudel to go tell the Rebbe. When it came time for Mincha, they asked the Rebbe to come downstairs. The Rebbe davened Mincha always upstairs in the small zal. But 770 was packed. People came from all over. As soon as they heard the verdict, they ran to 770. They asked the Rebbe to come downstairs. The Rebbe walks into the shul. The walls were dancing. The walls were dancing. And the Rebbe made believe he doesn't see anything. He walked his place like as if it was Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe showed no reaction at all. He didn't see anything by the Rebbe. But I was in California, I was listening on the hookup in the middle of Chazar Sashatz. Yonis and Hackner says the Rebbe asked for a chumash, which means the Rebbe wanted to prepare a sikha. You know? It was Tuesday of Parshas Vayigash, which finishes with the words Oid Yosef Chai v'chi hu Moishel b'chol Eretz Mitzrayim Yaakov es Hagolos asher sholach Yosef Loses Oisei v'techi ruach Yaakov Aviyim. You couldn't have a more perfect chitas. If you go through, I made a chesh with the girls. There is 378 possible aliyahs in a year. 54 times 7. 378 possible aliyahs. There is not another chitas that comes close. Tuesday of Vayigash, the perfect day for Didan Notzach. Oid Yosef Chai, the Rebbe still lives. It was so perfect. It was so perfect. It's like the Eibishter made the world for this moment. It was so perfect. But the Rebbe said something mind-blowing. And in a way it was contradicting what he had said a year before in Menvav. Because in Menvav the Rebbe said, you spread more Chassidus, there's a new Kitruk. You enter to the Kitruk, there's more Afat Samayonis. But when we won, the Rebbe said, and you could look up the Sikha, the Rebbe said it's impossible to say that we didn't do enough. It's impossible to say that we didn't do enough. In other words, maybe by the Alter Rebbe they didn't do enough. Maybe by the Middle Rebbe. In our generation, the Rebbe said it's impossible to say that we didn't do enough. So if we did enough, how could the Taina be that we're not doing enough? If it's all ruchnius, if it's not an uncle and a nephew and a sister-in-law fighting over books, which is such a tragic way to look at the whole story, it's very painful. It's embarrassing. But if we understand that it's an inyan ruchni, the Alter Rebbe went to jail because he was spreading too much chassidus. What's wrong with spreading chassidus? It's a good thing. What's the tenet? You have to use it. Yeah, the middle Rebbe went to jail. Why spreading too much chassidus? Why is he going for jail? Chassidus is a good thing. What's the tenet? If you give it and it doesn't get used, it's a waste. If it's a waste, someone has a taina. But the taina is not the chassid, the taina is not the Rebbe. So in Mem Vav, the year before when the Rebbe spoke, the Rebbe said that the reason this is happening is because there's a taina that we're not doing enough. And the answer is, do more! But when we won the case, the Rebbe said it's impossible to say that we weren't doing enough. In other words, in Mem Vav, the Rebbe didn't suggest it. But when we won, the Rebbe said, let's be honest, we didn't do enough. We did plenty. So the Rebbe asked Akash, if we did enough, then how did it happen? And the Rebbe said, there's only one answer. There is only one answer. And the answer is that they want that we should do even more. Sometimes there's a kitrug because something is wrong. And sometimes a kitrug, it's right. So if it's right, what's the kitrug? The Eibishter squeezes and squeezes and squeezes. He wants to get even more. And that's what the Rebbe said publicly on Chamisha B'Teves Tov Shin Mem Zayin. That it's impossible to say we haven't done enough. Even though the year before, the Rebbe gave that impression. And you have to say the pshat is that as much as we did, the Eibishter wants us to do more. And Didan Notzach means, I don't know what it means, that we are doing more, that we can do more, we will do more, we have done more, however you want to spin it. But that's the very spoke about it. Now, what happened was, publicly, when we won the case, B'shas Ma'aseh, at the time, the Rebbe's message was that it's finished, it's bygone, forget about it. Again, I was out of town. The people who were living here, the Bachim were 2 years younger than I, in all Teda, they went to the court every day. I mean, Crown Heights became a hub of copy machines because the court papers cost 15 cents a page. But court papers are about 6 words on a page, which is literally thousands of dollars. So one rich guy bought all the court papers, and every Bachim made copies. I mean, if your father is, I'm 57, if your father is 54, or 55, 56, someplace in your house, there's boxes and boxes and boxes of papers, thousands of sheets. Every single page of the court trials is collected by people. Some people put them into folders. And then there was the judge's verdict. The Rebbe said, don't read the papers, don't even read the judge's verdict. Forget about it, done, over. So the impression that we got was that we have to look at Pashas Sfarim as a non-thing. Didn't happen. Garnished. It's nothing. It's all anidav. It's like a wind blowing, a leaf blowing in the wind. Now compound that, add to that, what happened Beis Kislev Tavshim Mem Ches. I'm sure you've heard about that story where the Rebbe came out to go to the oil. There was the day the Sfarim were actually brought back. The Rebbe saw that people were standing outside waiting for him. The Rebbe got really, really, really upset. You've heard about this, right? The Rebbe showed, you could see the film, the Rebbe was so upset. So even though Shabbos, Zayin Kislev, Vayetze, the Rebbe fixed it a little bit, but no one forgot that. So when it came Hey TEVES Mem Ches, and again I wasn't here, I was in Russia, the Hasidim were very torn. It's always the same fight. It's the young and the old. The Bachram want to turn over the world, and the old people say, excuse me, if you turn over the world, the Rebbe's going to scream at me, not at you. The Rebbe doesn't get upset at the Bachram, he gets upset at the Mashpiyim. So the Bachram want to shturim and the Mashpiyim are not letting them. So it's the same old fight, the same fight you have today. It's been going on since the beginning of time. One of the things that happened was, they asked Rabbi Yael to prepare a maimer, for Chemish B'Teves, Mem Ches. And Rabbi Yael said, are you crazy? After Beis Kislev, we don't have enough? The Rebbe said, what do you mean? It's the Danotzech, it's a big Yom Tov. And Rabbi Yael refused. So the Bachram prepared the maimer themselves. And guess what? Take a wild guess. Guess what? The Rebbe figured out that the Rabbi Khan didn't write it. You understand? Rabbi Yael was an expert. The Rebbe said, what's this? The Rebbe was editing my Morim then on a regular basis. The Rebbe gets a maimer and he sees it was made by a 6-year-old. The Rebbe wrote Ein Zeh Kiyim Target, just a word-for-word translation. Rabbi Yael did prepare the Morim. Rabbi Yael refused to do it. The Bachram did it themselves. So you know what the Rebbe did? He edited that maimer. But the Rebbe had to do so much work. When Rabbi Yael gave the Rebbe a maimer, he had to do almost nothing. Rabbi Yael did all the work, so the Rebbe just made small corrections. But this maimer was prepared by nice guys, I'm sure, very chassidish young alike, some know a lot more chassidish than I, but they're not Yael Khan, you understand. The Rebbe worked very hard on the maimer, very hard on the maimer. And after all the editing, the Rebbe said, you can't give it out as muga. You can't give it out as edited maimer. So I remember the Courtcase came out. It was called Maimer V'Avdi David Topshin Memvav, with no border. Those are collector's items. If you have one of those originals, it's worth money. Unfortunately, I didn't save it. I should have had seichel. The Maimer came out, but you know the Rebbe's farm will have a border. You know what I'm saying? A border says on top, Kevet Hashal Se'er, Heichel Chi, Sha'arishan. That Maimer was not, all the fancy was missing. It just said Maimer V'Avdi David Memvav. It came out. The Rebbe edited it, but the Rebbe did not allow it to be published edited maimer because the Rebbe wasn't happy how it was prepared. At the end of that year, when they made the Sefer, Mamar Malukat, Chelik Beis, they asked the Rebbe permission to put it in the Sefer. And the Rebbe said they could put it in the Sefer and they could also add the border. So if you look at the old Malukat Chelik Beis, there's a maimer V'Avdi David Mem Vav. And you could see that the Rebbe didn't prepare it. It's written like a Hanoch. It's just written the way the Rebbe said it. So this was number one. Number two, the Bachram hung up a sign that the Hey TEVES Yem HaBoyer. So the Gaboyim tore it down. So the Bachram hung it up. A whole Friday, the Bachram won. The minute before Shkia, they hung up a sign, and the sign hung on the wall. Again, I wasn't here. I was in Russia. I missed this parasha again. But this is what we heard. The Rebbe walks into the Fabreng and he sits down and he starts Fabreng with the words. It says on the wall. It says on the wall. So the historical facts are that it wasn't in Mem Zayin that Chamisha B'Teves became a Yom Tov. It was in Mem Ches. The Rebbe said in the Fabrengen, the Lashon HaGemara by Chanukah, Lishono Acheres Kovum. The next year they made it into a Yom Tov. And in the Hanocha of that Fabrengen, Shabbos Vayigash, I think it was Ayin TEVES, but I'm not sure. In one of the first Hanochas, it says, in the footnote, what the Gemara says about Chanukah. So the official establishment of the Yom Tov of Chamisha B'Teves was not Mem Zayin. It wasn't 87. It was 88. The next year they announced the Yom Tov. And the Rebbe made it official. And the Rebbe said that this Yom Tov is about Sfarim. Today, Chamisha is about Sfarim. Therefore, what should you do? The Rebbe said you should buy Sfarim. You should bind old Sfarim. You should support libraries. You should build libraries. And the Rebbe made an official declaration, which was put in many newspapers, asking people who are Machaber Sfarim to send their Sfarim to the library of Agudas Chasidei Chabad. There used to be two libraries. The Rebbe's library was in the house next door. The Frierdiker Rebbe's library was in the basement of 770. After Pashas HaSfarim, they excavated underneath what's now the deck, and they connected the Frierdiker Rebbe's library and the Rebbe's library are connected underneath the building next door and on top. You know, we have the tunnel that goes across. All of after we won the Sfarim, the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe's libraries were joined officially, and the Rebbe made an official request that people should send old Sfarim, rare Sfarim, and even new Sfarim. You print a sefer, send a copy to the Rebbe's library, because the Rebbe wanted to strengthen the library of Good Chasidei Chabad, and that's the minhagim of Chamisha. The Yom Tov of Achei Temimim is Ma'azari B'chaim Avu B'chayim. It's a optimistic thing. The minhagim of Achei Temimim are Sfarim. Okay, seid alle gesund zu starten.